The Vorax had long been known as the galaxy's most fearsome predators. Their reputation spread like wildfire across star systems, and their ships, sleek and deadly, cut through space with an ease that made even the most advanced fleets tremble. The Vorax didn't just conquer, they hunted. Other species were no more than prey to them, to be captured or destroyed without a second thought. They had no equals. At least, that was what they believed. For centuries, the Vorax had ruled without challenge. Their armies were swift and brutal, their tactics honed through countless battles. No species had ever dared to oppose them, and any who did were quickly wiped out, their worlds left in ruins. The Vorax were unstoppable. That was, until they heard about Earth. At first, the reports were dismissed as nonsense. Earth was a relatively young planet, a civilization that had barely mastered space travel. The Vorax had no interest in such primitive worlds. But then, strange things began to happen. Earth's ships, unremarkable in design compared to the Vorax fleet, began to show up at the fringes of Vorax territory. At first, they were easy targets. Earth's military forces, though brave, were no match for the Vorax's superior technology and overwhelming firepower. The Vorax destroyed a few ships, sent a few messages of warning, and went back to their hunt. However, something started to change. The humans, instead of retreating, came back again and again. Their soldiers were unrelenting, determined to fight. The Vorax found themselves puzzled. How could a species so young, so underdeveloped in comparison, continue to defy them? They began to notice that the humans weren't just fighting. They were learning. They adapted quickly, developing tactics that the Vorax had not expected. One by one, Earth's ships began to become more organized, their movements more coordinated. They didn't have the firepower of the Vorax, but they had something else, something that made the predators uneasy: resilience. The humans never gave up. They kept pushing even when they were outmatched. The Vorax's once absolute dominance began to crack. At first, the Vorax dismissed this as mere annoyance. After all, Earth was no match for them. But as time went on, their victories started to lose their shine. The humans were beginning to fight back, and the Vorax warlords did not like it. In a closed-door meeting of the highest-ranking warlords, the leader of the Vorax, Draxar, listened to reports from his generals. "We've lost 3 scout ships in the last 2 days," General Rilk reported, his voice strained. "The humans are adapting faster than we thought. They've learned to evade our radar. They've developed new types of weapons, and they're hitting us in ways we've never experienced." Draxar's eyes narrowed. He had never been one to show concern in the face of danger, but this was different. The Vorax were supposed to be the predators, not the prey. The idea that an insignificant species like humans could pose a threat to them was laughable, but the evidence was impossible to ignore. Earth's soldiers were persistent, and in war, persistence often outlasted strength. "We will crush them," Draxar growled. "They are nothing more than insects, scurrying in the dark. It is only a matter of time before we wipe them out." His confidence was unwavering. "Send in the heavy fleet. Wipe them off the map." The meeting room fell silent for a moment as the warlords nodded in agreement. They were the predators, the conquerors. To back down now would be a disgrace. They would show the humans their place. They would remind the galaxy who the true rulers were. But even as the orders were given, a small voice from the back of the room spoke up. A voice that wasn't as certain as the others. General Lauren, a seasoned warrior who had fought countless battles across the galaxy, stood up slowly. His eyes met Draxar's, and for the first time in a long time, the leader of the Vorax saw something he hadn't expected: doubt. "Sir," Lauren began, his voice calm but firm, "I've seen the humans' tactics. They are not like the other species we've destroyed. They adapt too quickly. Their soldiers are resourceful. I believe they're learning from every engagement." Draxar's expression hardened. "What are you saying, General?" "I'm saying that we should not underestimate them," Lauren replied. We've been too confident. They may seem weak, but they are relentless. If we are not careful, they will find a way to defeat us." The other warlords scoffed at Lauren's words. The Vorax had crushed empires before. They had reduced entire civilizations to dust. How could this insignificant species stand against them? They laughed at the very idea of humanity being a serious threat. But Draxar was not so easily dismissive. He looked at Lauren, his sharp eyes measuring the general's every word. "You are suggesting that we should hold back against them?" he asked, his voice dripping with contempt. "I'm suggesting we be cautious," Lauren said. "The humans are not like the others. They fight for something greater. I believe they are more than just a nuisance." The room fell into silence. Draxar glared at Lauren, but deep down, a small seed of doubt began to take root. Could the humans really be more than just another prey species? Was there something they were missing? The decision was made. The Vorax would launch a full-scale assault on Earth. They would destroy Earth's fleet, annihilate any resistance, and remind the galaxy why the Vorax were feared. But as the first wave of attacks were launched, something strange began to happen. The humans didn't fall apart. They didn't break. Instead, they responded with a fury that shocked the Vorax. They fought back with everything they had, every weapon, every strategy, every ounce of their spirit. It wasn't enough to stop the Vorax's overwhelming force, but it was enough to make the predators think twice. Each battle that passed, the humans learned. They adapted, refining their tactics. They used the Vorax's own aggression against them. The predator's strength was being turned on itself. Slowly, the humans were not just surviving. They were beginning to win small victories. Draxar could feel the tide shifting. The pride of the Vorax, once unshakable, was starting to crack. It was impossible to ignore any longer. The humans were not going to fall as easily as the predators had hoped. And deep down, Draxar knew that the battle for the galaxy's future had only just begun. The Vorax had never known fear before. Now, they were beginning to feel it. Something had changed. They were no longer the hunters. They were becoming the hunted. The day they met Earth's soldiers, the predators had unknowingly sealed their fate. And the war had only just begun. The Vorax fleet moved through space like a dark wave, blocking out stars as their warships cut across the void. Over 50 destroyers, armed with heavy plasma cannons and shield generators, sped toward the outer edges of the solar system. Their mission was clear: strike Earth's outposts, destroy resistance, and make an example out of the humans. For the Vorax, this was routine. Just another hunt. Just another planet to break. Commander Rizek led the operation. He stood tall in his war room, his claws tapping on the control panel as the ships approached Mars, where Earth's forward command center was hidden beneath the rocky surface. Rizek's voice was calm, full of confidence. "Begin descent. No survivors. Send a message they will not forget." The Vorax launched their assault in perfect formation. They struck fast and hard. Mars shook under the force of the orbital bombardment. Dust clouds rose into space. Dozens of defense turrets were destroyed in seconds. Vorax ground forces landed quickly, tearing through outer defenses. The attack was brutal, and for the first few minutes, everything went as planned. But then something changed. Human resistance didn't crumble. It hardened. The first sign came when a Vorax squad breached one of the underground tunnels. They expected to face a few frightened soldiers, maybe some automated defenses. What they got instead was a well-organized trap. The humans had rigged the tunnel walls with explosive charges and motion sensors. As soon as the Vorax stepped in, the corridor lit up with fire. Half the squad was lost in seconds. The rest were picked off one by human soldiers in advanced exosuits, moving fast and firing with precision. Vorax armor, built for strength, wasn't designed for speed. The humans used that to their advantage. In just under an hour, the Vorax lost more troops underground than they had in entire campaigns across 3 other planets. Commander Rizek was furious. He had never seen resistance like this. "They're just humans," he growled, pacing across the deck of his command ship. "How are they doing this?" Back on Earth, General Ayla Monroe stood before a massive digital display showing the ongoing battle. She didn't smile, but her voice carried a sharp confidence. "They thought we'd be easy prey," she said to her team. "Let's show them how Earth bites back." What the Vorax didn't understand yet was that Earth had been preparing for this. After first contact with alien species years ago, Earth's governments united under one defense force. The humans didn't just build ships. They studied their enemies, ran simulations, trained soldiers in zero warfare, and developed tactics that relied on speed, unpredictability, and adaptability. They knew they couldn't match the Vorax ship for ship, so they built smarter weapons, stealth drones that could sneak onto enemy vessels, EMP bombs that shut down shield systems, jammers that confused targeting systems. Where the Vorax brought brute force, the humans brought cleverness. Rizik's frustration grew with every report. Mars Sector 4 lost. Resistance spreading in tunnels. Airlock ambush in Zone 7. What is happening? Meanwhile, human soldiers led by Captain Rise launched counterstrikes. Using narrow canyons and rocky terrain, they forced Vorak walkers into choke points. Traps, decoys, and guerrilla tactics made the battlefield a nightmare. Rise himself took down 2 Vorak warbeasts, using only a sniper rifle and a cloaking field. Every time the Vorax adapted, the humans changed their strategy again. But humans were not without loss. Many brave soldiers fell defending the outposts. Earth's command center received constant updates. Ships down, positions lost, but also Vorax squadrons retreating, heavy vehicles destroyed, command officers captured. It was not a one-sided fight. It was a storm. And in that storm, the Vorax began to feel something unfamiliar: hesitation. On board the Vorak flagship, Rizik stood in front of the battle map, red lights flashing all across the screen. Earth forces were now pushing back. Small strike teams had disabled 2 destroyers. Human codebreakers had hacked into Vorak comms, spreading false commands to sow confusion. "This is no longer a routine purge," Rizik admitted, his voice lower now. "The humans are fighting like predators." The last straw came when Earth's fleet, smaller and slower than the Vorax, appeared from the far side of the Martian moon. They had used the moon's gravity to slingshot into position without being detected. In a tight formation, they struck directly at the command fleet. The battle in orbit was chaos. Vorak ships, usually in control, scrambled to regroup. But Earth's pilots were precise. They didn't engage head-on. They danced between the larger ships, targeting weak points, blowing out engines, forcing some to crash into each other. Earth's flagship, Vanguard, led the charge, with Admiral Grant issuing a now-famous order: "We do not run. We do not hide. We take the fight to the monsters." By the end of the day, 5 Vorak destroyers were disabled. One was completely destroyed after a human infiltration team boarded it and detonated its power core. Vorak ground forces began pulling out of Mars tunnels. The humans weren't supposed to last more than an hour. It had been 17. Commander Rizik called for retreat. It was a word no Vorak had spoken in generations. Back on Earth, celebrations were quiet. There were no parades, no grand speeches, only the tired faces of soldiers who knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. They had held the line, yes, but the Vorax would come back, and next time, they'd be angrier. Still, something had changed. For the first time in recorded history, the Vorax had been pushed back. For the first time, the galaxy saw that humans weren't weak. They were dangerous. They could adapt. They could fight. And they would not break. The Vorax left the Mars battlefield with heavy losses. Rizik stared out the viewport of his retreating cruiser, his pride wounded deeper than any battle scar. "We underestimated them," he admitted in silence. "That was our mistake." As the stars passed before him, One thought burned in his mind. This war would not be easy, and the predators were no longer sure who the prey really was. The silence inside the Vorak High Command was unnatural. No one dared to speak. The defeat at Mars was a wound they didn't know how to cover. The mighty Voraks, who had never retreated from a battlefield, had been forced to flee by humans, by prey. The loss of 5 destroyers and hundreds of elite soldiers was not just a military failure. It was a stain on their pride. Commander Rizek stood before the Council of Warlords, his jaw clenched, eyes sharp. We were unprepared. We underestimated the humans. That mistake will not happen again. But even as he spoke those words, he knew something deeper had shifted. The humans had exposed cracks in the Vorak Empire. Worse, the galaxy had seen it. Other species had watched the Mars battle through hidden channels, encrypted networks, and spy drones. For years, they had feared the Voraks. But now they saw hope in Earth. Back on Earth, the morale was stronger than ever. General Ayla Monroe reviewed the post-battle analysis with her team. They will come back, stronger. But so will we. Her voice was steady, her focus sharper than before. We hit them harder than they expected. We survived their first real strike. And now, it's our turn to change the rules. Earth's commanders knew they couldn't win by brute force. The Voraks still had more ships, more soldiers, and more experience in galactic warfare. But Earth had something else: creativity, unpredictability, and a refusal to give up. So the humans did what they did best. They started planning smarter. While the Voraks rebuilt, Earth launched a series of hit-and-run missions. Instead of defending static positions, they moved quickly through space, striking Vorak fuel stations, supply chains, and communication hubs. Stealth units placed decoy signals across dead space, making the Vorak fleet chase shadows. And all the while, Earth scientists worked day and night to improve their weapons, hacking tools, and defenses. In one daring mission, a team of 6 human operatives infiltrated a Vorak outpost on the planet Tarsus IV. Disguised in stolen armor, they uploaded a virus into the Vorak war database, corrupting their targeting systems across 4 sectors. The Voraks lost weeks of coordination. Chaos spread through their command chain. And Earth didn't stop there. All across Vorak territory, small sparks of rebellion began to rise. On the mining world of Korin, enslaved alien workers fought back, inspired by Earth's resistance. On the border planet Venus, Vorak troops refused to follow orders, questioning their leaders for the first time. The Vorak name, once whispered in fear, was now followed by doubt. The Council of Warlords grew restless. They held emergency meetings. Some blamed Rizek. Others demanded a full invasion of Earth. We must crush them with everything we have. One shouted, burn their world to ash. Let the galaxy watch them fall. But General Loren spoke again, his voice calm but firm. You can destroy their cities, but that will not stop them. They fight with something more powerful than fear. They fight for their home, for their people. If we do not understand that, we will lose again. The council ignored him. They voted to prepare a massive attack, a full-scale invasion of Earth itself. Word of the coming assault reached Earth through intercepted transmissions. It was no longer a secret. The Voraks were gathering a fleet 3 times the size of the Mars force. The humans knew this was coming. They had expected it. Now, they had to survive it. The skies above Earth lit up with preparations. Fleets mobilized. Orbital defenses were strengthened. Satellites carrying pulse cannons were launched. Engineers built new defense grids around major cities. Civilians were evacuated to underground shelters. All of Earth braced for the storm. Then came the day. The Vorak fleet arrived, darkening Earth's orbit with hundreds of warships. Commander Rizek stood at the front of the bridge, eyes locked on the blue planet below. No more mistakes, he said. End them. The first wave of attacks came swiftly. Orbital platforms exploded. Cities shook under atmospheric strikes. Vorak drop pods rained down like fire from the sky, but Earth was ready. From the hidden mountain bunkers, anti-air batteries roared to life. Human ships launched in tight squadrons, drawing the Vorak fighters into tight spaces, then blasting them from the sky. In the city of New Frankfurt, a massive Vorak walker advanced through the streets, firing at anything that moved. But before it could reach the command center, a small human team on hoverbikes lured it into an ambush. A single missile from a rooftop collapsed the building beneath the walker's feet. It tumbled, and human infantry rushed in to finish the job. All across the planet, similar scenes played out. Humans didn't match the Voraks in size or strength, but they had speed, skill, and knowledge of their terrain. They used every trick, every trap, and every inch of ground. And slowly, against all odds, they began to turn the tide. Up in orbit, Earth's flagship Vanguard clashed with the Vorak dreadnought Scarethul. The two giants exchanged fire across the upper atmosphere. Inside the Vanguard, Admiral Elias Grant watched his crew work with quiet precision. Hold the line. If we fall, the planet falls with us. The battle was brutal. The Vanguard lost 2 engines. Fires raged on multiple decks, but in one desperate move, the human crew turned the ship's core into a massive EMP, disabling nearby Vorak ships, including the Scarethul. Both ships began to fall toward Earth's surface in a trail of smoke and fire. At the last moment, emergency teams ejected most of the crew in escape pods. The Vanguard crashed into the ocean, sending a shockwave that reached the coast. But the Vorak ship crashed into a mountain, broken and silent. Commander Rizek survived. Barely. He emerged from the wreckage, burned and furious. They should have fallen, he roared. They should have been broken. But they weren't. Earth stood. Damaged, bloodied, but not broken. General Monroe stood before her command team, exhausted but proud. We held them off. We made them bleed. And now, we show them we're not afraid. In the days that followed, Earth launched a message across the galaxy. A simple signal. Just 3 words. We are ready. Those 3 words shook the stars. Across the galaxy, species once too scared to resist the Voraks now began to rise. Small uprisings lit up like sparks in the dark. The Vorak Empire, though still powerful, had lost something precious. Fear. The galaxy no longer saw them as unstoppable. And the Voraks. They realized they were no longer hunters in control. They were being hunted. By humans. By hope. By change. Let me know if you'd like part 4 next or want to make this even more intense with added action or suspense. The Vorak fleet limped back across the stars. What was supposed to be a final, crushing blow to Earth had turned into a nightmare. Half their warships were destroyed. Commanders were missing. The elite soldiers had been defeated by humans who shouldn't have lasted more than a day. For the first time in generations, the Voraks tasted fear, not because they were weak, but because their enemy was smarter than anything they had faced before. Commander Rizek sat alone in the shadowed bridge of a damaged cruiser. His eyes burned with rage, but also something else. Doubt. They were supposed to run, he whispered. They were supposed to beg. He replayed battle footage again and again. He watched humans ambush his troops, disable his ships, crack their comms, and dismantle their plans like they were reading them in advance. He didn't understand how. But someone did. Back on Earth, in a secured underground facility known as Deep Core, a small team of scientists, linguists, and war strategists worked day and night. Their mission was not just to build weapons. It was to understand the Voraks, their language, their behavior, their culture. And it was working. Dr. Elena Reyes stood before a digital map of Vorak-controlled space. She pointed at blinking red dots scattered across the galaxy. They move in predictable patterns. Every time they face resistance, they respond with force, not strategy. That's their weakness. She looked to General Monroe. They don't adapt, but we do. Monroe nodded. Then we use that. Break their rhythm. The team started decoding Vorak war manuals, intercepted messages, and ancient broadcasts. What they found surprised them. Vorak military training relied on tradition. Every soldier followed strict codes, passed down through bloodlines. Honor in battle. Never retreat. Never question. Never change. That had worked for centuries, until they met humans. Humans didn't follow a single rulebook. They had dozens of strategies. Each squad could change its tactics mid-battle. Leaders made decisions on instinct, not just protocol. This chaos was what made humans dangerous, and what the Voraks didn't know how to fight. So Earth turned this discovery into a weapon. The next phase of the war began with silence. No ships, no attacks. For days, the Voraks waited for retaliation. None came. They scanned deep space. Nothing. And then, without warning, everything changed. One by one, Vorak systems began to fail. Long-range sensors went blind. Supply stations shut down. Warships lost their navigation. Internal AIs crashed. Panic spread. They didn't know it yet, but Earth had launched a cyber campaign like nothing the galaxy had seen before. Human codebreakers had created a virus that mimicked Vorak command signals. It slid through their networks unseen, giving false orders, shutting down weapons mid-battle, even turning ships against each other. Vorak fleets began to collapse, not because they were destroyed, but because they no longer trusted their own systems. In one mission near the Vorak colony world of Drakkar, a human team took control of a drone ship and flew it directly into the colony's main power grid. The explosion knocked out the entire planet's defenses. The humans didn't even have to fire a shot. The Voraks tried to fight back, but every time they adapted, Earth moved faster. Small human teams appeared on remote planets, stirring rebellions, sabotaging factories, crippling fuel stations. These weren't armies, just 5 or 6 operatives, but they knew exactly where to hit. The Vorak Empire began to fracture. Inside the Council of Warlords, panic grew. Commander Rizek argued for one last push, a final attempt to destroy Earth. But others weren't so sure. They had never seen the Council divided. Now, warlords questioned each other's orders. Some even suggested negotiating with the humans. Unthinkable, Rizek growled. They are prey. They should kneel before us. But another voice challenged him. General Lawrence stood, his tone calm but cutting. You keep calling them prey. But look at us. Our fleets are broken. Our people question us. They are not prey anymore. He looked around the room. They are the future. We are just holding on to the past. The council fell silent. Back on Earth, something else was happening. For the first time, humans weren't just defending. They were inspiring. Across the galaxy, species who had suffered under Vorak rule began to rise. Protests, riots, small armies forming in secret. Earth began sending advisors, trainers, supplies, not to control, but to help. General Monroe watched the reports roll in. We're not just fighting a war anymore, she said to her staff. We're changing the galaxy. The next mission was Earth's boldest yet. Codenamed Operation Breakfang, it targeted the Vorak's most sacred location, their war archive on Jarol Prime. A massive fortress built into a mountain, filled with centuries of military history, strategy, and training programs. No one had ever breached it. Earth planned to do it with just 10 people. The strike team, led by Captain Reyes, dropped in under a storm, using weather interference to avoid detection. They hiked through ice and rock, bypassed patrols, hacked doors, and made it to the central chamber. There, they planted a message, not a bomb. A message, broadcast on every Vorak military frequency in their own language, with the face of a human soldier looking into the camera. You were taught to never run, never question. But you are losing. You know it. We fight not because we want war, but because we will not be ruled. You cannot defeat us because we are not afraid to change. And you are. If you keep coming, we will keep fighting, but you will lose." Then they left. The message spread like fire. Some Vorak soldiers ignored it. Others began to think. A few even disobeyed orders. The Predator's code was breaking. The strength of the Voraks had always been their unity, their discipline, their fearsome control. But now that control was slipping, they had ruled by fear, but humans had given the galaxy something stronger than fear: hope. On a quiet observation deck orbiting Earth, General Monroe and Dr. Elena Riss watched the stars. "They thought strength was about being unchanging," Elena said softly. Monroe nodded. "But real strength is knowing when to evolve." Far away, in a dark chamber of the Vorak Command Center, Commander Rizik stood alone. He stared at the stars in silence. He had chased humans across systems, tried to crush them with everything he had. But they had broken his code, his army, his belief. And maybe they had broken him too. The stars were no longer silent. Across the galaxy, systems once ruled by the Vorak Empire began to pulse with change. Rebellions grew stronger. Old alliances broke. Colonies that had been under Vorak control for generations now raised human flags, not as conquered worlds, but as allies. The fear that once held billions under Vorak power was fading. Earth had become more than a homeworld. It had become a symbol. The final phase of the war began not with an invasion, but with a whisper. A coded message, passed through resistance networks, reached every major Vorak station in the galaxy. It said only, "The hunt ends now." The Vorak Council had lost its unity. Warlords blamed each other. Soldiers refused orders. Even some captains left their posts, their eyes opened by the words of humans and the flames of rebellion. And yet, Commander Rizik still stood tall. He had lost fleets, battles, and pride, but not his will. "They are clever," he admitted, "but cleverness is not victory." He rallied what remained of the Vorak High Fleet. His last command was brutal and clear. "Strike Earth one last time. Burn it. Leave nothing behind." His warships moved through the stars, faster than before, silent, and without mercy. It was no longer a full empire behind him, but the sharpest pieces of what remained: loyalists, fanatics, those who believed the Vorak name still meant domination. Earth saw it coming. But this time, they didn't wait. The humans had grown too. Their fleet, once small and desperate, was now sleek, upgraded, and battle-tested. They moved not with fear, but with confidence. Generals and soldiers who had once been farmers, students, and engineers now stood as leaders of one of the most respected forces in the galaxy. At Earth's Defense Command, General Ayla Monroe reviewed the incoming data. "This is his last hand," she said quietly. "Rizik wants to destroy what he can't control." She paused, looking across the room at her crew. "We won't let him." And they didn't. The battle in Earth's orbit was the largest in recorded history. Hundreds of ships clashed above the blue planet. Earth's fleet didn't meet the enemy head-on. Instead, they split into coordinated squadrons, weaving between the enemy lines, targeting weak points. Vorak ships, strong but rigid, couldn't adapt fast enough. Human stealth ships disabled shield generators. EMP drones shut down engines. Eye-guided missiles found weak hulls and hit with perfect timing. Rizik's fleet burned under the stars, but still it pushed forward. He led from the front, his command ship Vorak's Fang larger than anything Earth had seen. It tore through 3 human cruisers in minutes, heading straight for the surface. "He's trying to land," a tech shouted in Earth's command room. Monroe turned to Admiral Grant, now in charge of orbital defense. "We stop him here. He doesn't touch the ground." Admiral Grant nodded, calm but focused. "Let's end this." The Vanguard IA, Earth's newest flagship, moved to intercept. The 2 warships, symbols of 2 worlds, collided in a clash of light and fire above the planet. Inside Vorak's Fang, Rizik stood tall, His armor cracked from past battles, his face scarred, but his eyes burning with fury. Earth dies today. Inside the Vanguard II, Admiral Grant stood calm, surrounded by a crew that had trained for this exact moment. Not on our watch. The two ships fought like titans. Cannons fired, hulls ripped, systems failed. But then, one small move changed everything. A stealth fighter, piloted by Captain Rice himself, zipped under Vorak's fang and planted a pulse bomb near its core. The explosion didn't destroy the ship, but it forced it to power down for 30 seconds. That was all Earth needed. Missiles hit the weakened side. Explosions rocked the ship. Flames spread through its decks. Escape pods launched. Many, but not all. Risic refused to leave. "I will not run from prey," he shouted as his bridge collapsed around him. Vorak's fang fell into Earth's atmosphere, burning like a falling star. It crashed into the Arctic Ocean, sinking deep below the ice. The final battle was over. Risic was gone. The war was over. Cheers echoed across Earth. In orbit, damaged ships flashed their lights in celebration. On the ground, cities rang bells and lit up the skies. But the humans didn't celebrate with pride or arrogance. They celebrated survival, unity, hope. General Monroe stood before the United Earth Council 2 days later. Broadcasts of her speech reached every corner of the galaxy. "We were hunted, but we did not hide. We were tested, but we did not break. Today, the Vorak Empire has fallen, not because we were stronger, but because we refused to become like them. We showed the galaxy something better than power. We showed what it means to fight for each other." Her words echoed through systems once ruled by fear. One by one, Vorak-controlled worlds declared their freedom. The empire collapsed, not with an explosion, but with a quiet final breath. In the ruins of the Vorak capital on Jarol Prime, human and alien aid teams worked together to rebuild. No flags were planted. No monuments were built. Earth had no interest in becoming the next ruler of the stars. Instead, they helped create something new. The Galactic Accord. A council of equals, humans, aliens, former enemies, new allies. No empire. No warlords. Just voices trying to build peace together. Captain Rice visited one of the former Vorak colonies, now independent. A young alien child ran up to him and asked, "Are humans really the ones who beat the monsters?" He smiled. "No," he said gently. "We just reminded the monsters that they're not the only ones who can fight." Back on Earth, in a quiet corner of a park once hit by bombs, General Monroe sat alone, watching the sky. The stars no longer felt cold. They felt alive. They felt human.